All right, folks, welcome to Leader Sight, where our mission is to provide you with some insight, some foresight, and maybe a little bit of 2020 hindsight. That's always the best kind. I'm Eric Thompson, and I'm the president of Thompson Leadership Development. And we're going to be doing this show all through 21. I love interviewing people, and I love getting inspiring people and onto this show and talk to them a little bit about what they know, what they're learning, what they're discovering. And today it's my pleasure to have Ben Pearson, who is the founder of Enalas, which stands for Everybody Needs a Little Help Sometimes, on my show. Enalas helps brands navigate online marketplaces all over the world, including a fascinating joint venture with a company in India that we'll get into a little bit here. And I met Ben Pearson a bunch of years ago when he was taking an advanced leadership course that I was facilitating. And he was a really strong student back then, a very introspective person, very thoughtful, very insightful person. I found Ben inspiring as a youngster. And now, years later, it's not surprising to me that he's founded a very interesting company, very successful company. And it's been my pleasure to be getting to know Ben again in another chapter of his life. Welcome, Ben Pearson.
Thanks, Eric.
Good to see you, Ben.
Likewise.
How much snow did you get there in Rochester, New York?
It's not too bad. It's cold. It's probably a few inches last night. So
yeah. Ben, I love interviewing people, and I want to thank you for helping me indulge in my habit here. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Let's give him a little framework about Enalas. So I gave him a skinny on the company. I got some pictures to show, but why don't you let's tell him what Enalas is.
Yeah, so the Enalas I started it in 2012. My sister, who's actually on this call, is the one that named it. We were at breakfast with my grandparents, and she said that I really should just start my own company and call it that, and that kind of stuck. We do a lot of different things, everything from manufacturing, designing manufacturing science equipment, to running our own Amazon third-party distribution center, analytics, and marketing firm, which we use to help other smaller manufacturers go onto very complex e-commerce channels. We started in 2012. It was just me. And I did a joint venture with my business brother, Sumit, who I'd known for about 6 years at that point in time. So in 2012, it was just me. And in India, we had about 200 people. Today in the United States, we have about 40 people. And in India, we're up to about 600 people. We're third year in a row on the Rochester Top 100 for fastest growing companies in Western New York. And we've been very fortunate and blessed enough to continue growing through the pandemic, despite numerous pivots, churns, bumps in the road, crazy different things we've had to do to stay afloat. And I'm super proud that we've been able to hire, not fire, and no layoffs, and keep charging through the pandemic.
Give me a little sense of the financial size of the company. How would you signal that to the world?
Let's see. I would say that we're strong 8 figures.
Ben, let's got to go into this craziness of 2020 a little bit here. And so, this is going to be recorded. It's going to be on YouTube available for people. And I really am interested, Ben, in putting you in a position to share some of your wisdom. I think you're an interesting thinker about leadership. I know it because I get to watch it working with your company. So talk about the craziness of 2020 a little and what you think helped you guys adapt as well as you did to it.
It was March 12th when COVID really hit us with New York State basically Cuomo just started rapidly shutting things down. And it was the first time in my life I ever wrote a letter to hand to military personnel to describe that what we did was considered essential to stay open, which was really unnerving. And I remember writing the letter and thinking I had to talk to everybody about it. And we didn't know about social distancing at the time. So we had a big meeting back in the warehouse, brought everybody in, talked about everything we did know about the pandemic at that point, and that if I'll never forget saying that if they shut us down, we'll pay everybody for at least 4 weeks, even if they're just sitting at home, because we don't know what we don't know. And I remember Rob, who's on this call too, like 20 minutes before the meeting, thinking, Rob, you got to crunch the numbers and see, make sure there's enough cash float sitting around to do this.
Link first and find out later. Ask your CFO, Rob Weiner, later, huh, Ben?
But the point stuck that we really wanted to build for people to trust us that we would figure this out no matter what. And we've done some crazy pivots, and that's what why I think it was successful is the team really trusted each other. And no matter how crazy it got, like at one point when our core market and education shut off, we became an ethanol distribution focal point using a manufacturing R&D prototype facility to figure out how to repack these supplies in such a way that they could mass distribute into markets in a quicker, more efficient fashion to help people out. So we took 2/3 of the company's workforce off of their day job and did that for 3 months with a business partner of ours down the road. And it was unnerving and crazy and stressful, but everybody was in the boat rowing together. And I think it somewhat started with that story of just saying, hey, no matter what, we're going to get through this. And those punches kind of just kept rolling as the year went on. And each time we would get that kind of hit in the face, we'd just regroup together and say, here's what we're going to do. And here's what success looks like. And if it's not successful, here's plan B, C, and D.
Ben, it was amazing to be in touch with you during that time. And I love the story about you guys becoming an ethanol distribution center, which active ingredient in the hand sanitizer. So that obviously was something people were hungry for.
Interestingly enough, not our ethanol.
Oh, okay.
Our ethanol, scientific grade, denatured, nothing to do with the hand sanitizer.
Oh, I think that's not why you were selling a lot of that.
Yeah, we were selling more to like industrial research businesses, that kind of thing.
Thank you. So I'm fascinated, Ben, with adaptability. It's one of the things I really enjoy, being able to watch different organizations and see like the places where they get stuck with adapting, and also to see amazing adaptability when it's there before you. So I think you're saying that the adaptability of your team was pretty exceptional in 2020. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I want to ask you, like, what goes into that? What are the ingredients that make that up in a culture?
A lot of trust. My team is very, very smart. A lot of it for me was letting go. The pandemic taught me how much I couldn't control in a really blunt fashion. My situation with my kids taught me this year how much I wasn't in control. And I had a good friend of mine tell me that it was doing a life's work in vulnerability in 1 year. And that being forced to not be in every single detail, and not, the physicist in me had to sit the bench and rely more on faith that things would be all right, and that everybody on the team would be able to not step up one step, but jump an entire flight of stairs, which they did, allowed us to be very adaptable. And the other part of it was the amount of innovation in the company when we were pushed into a corner was incredible. Some of the things that we've done and seen.
Can you spell that interesting link out a little bit more for us? between vulnerability and adaptability. Very interesting. A year's lesson in vulnerability. What's the connection, Ben?
I had a few moments this year where it kind of came to the point where it either felt like it could be a panic attack or it could be a leap in faith. And it was a lot more about the leap in faith and trusting in that our mission of the company and what we were trying to do was strong enough that it would be all right in the end, and I wouldn't have to be so controlling, in that letting go of it somewhat and letting other folks take over their parts, and everybody jump to new levels because we had no other choice to survive, was what created the adaptability.
Yeah, I like that link. I don't know if I've ever linked it up before, this being comfortable with being vulnerable. It's kind of psychobabble at one hand, on the other hand, it's very profound that a person who is able to keep breathing when they're feeling threatened and keep thinking may have a better ability to make choices about what's really threatening and maybe what we should go ahead and leap into. I watch a lot of companies cling to what they already know. And sometimes it's people. They cling to people they already know, partners they already know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think the relationships saved us in 2020. My business brother and I, Sumit, went through, he more than I, a lot of trauma that we didn't expect, and forced separation that we didn't anticipate. And the linkage between us was the core mission of ourselves, not just our businesses, was so aligned that a lot of big decisions we had to make where we couldn't talk, but we had to take action, correlated perfectly, and actually brought us closer together, even though we couldn't see each other with the regular frequency that we did. And they're 7,500 miles apart, and we've had deaths on both sides that we couldn't pay our respects in the manners that we wish to. But the driving force between us was to keep the whole ship going, so that our communities, which we don't really view in terms of a country boundary perspective, but those in our ecosystem, would be okay and survive and thrive and pay mortgages and send kids to school, and to keep moving forward. It was the driving force that kept us going.
Ben, I want to give you a chance to tell us a little bit more about this relationship with Sumit, who is his family started this company in India that you have the joint venture with. You've spoken about that relationship in ways that I find very meaningful, very interesting, the level of trust between you. Very interesting to me, partly because it's a global thing, just two countries. It's inspiring when we see global citizenship, when we see global family. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that situation with us?
Um,
You feel pretty close to Sumit. You trust him a lot.
yeah, he's a brother I didn't have, and the work ethic was the same, and we seemed to go through these trials together. Even with the way we met, he flew over to the United States in 2006. I worked in a huge corporation. He was making a cold sales call pretty much, and nobody gave him a conference room. And I felt that I remember feeling like that felt really cold to me.
Mm.
So my first time I met Sumit was in a cafeteria table, and he had all of his physics products out. And I was like, wow, I'm a physicist, physics geek, love this stuff. It's toys to me. It's like, it's candy. It was really good stuff. And then I was like, I was very new on the job. I was like, hey, what happened? Why are we in the cafeteria? As young 20s. And he's looking at me, he's like, I don't know why we're in the cafeteria. And I was like, yeah, I really like these products. And can we just play with them? And I spent an afternoon playing physics with Sumit in the cafeteria in front of some big shots that they got bored and left. And this outlines our relationship pretty well. He left. We kept in touch on Skype at the time. And I never forget, I picked up 38 items from him. Half of them were new, half of them were better cost positions. And our CEO at the time said, if that doesn't work, you're fired. And I told Sumit that. And then he's like, well, yeah, if it doesn't work for me, I'm going to go bankrupt. And that's pretty much every stage of our relationship has gone like this, buying buildings together, doing huge investments together, facing tragedy together. It's we always bet on each other more than the money. And that's created a bond that we trust very, very, very much. It's even come to the point with the financials aren't really what's important anymore. It's about sustainability, the next 20 years. If the next generations want to come into the companies, what's that look like? What's the educational ecosystems around our employees look like? That's a lot more of the conversations these days.
I got to stay on this Submit beat for one more second. And I think that's an absolutely amazing story of the beginning of a partnership. I just love that story, Ben, of meeting in the hall there. But I'm going to take a moment here to share my screen and show you folks give you a little picture's worth 1,000 words. So here's Ben and his dad, Doug, who I believe is your first U.S. employee.
Yep, number one, couple months in.
This is a kind of a interesting picture. You can get a little feeling for Enalas and what their warehouse looks like. And here's Ben with his two cousins, Chris and Mike Wink, very, very important players in this business who give their heart and soul to the place. Oh, Ben, tell them about the little tiny skateboards for a sec. You can see the picture on the left, this picture of miniature skateboards.
Yeah, so it looks like we got Sophie, Luke, and Joe working here. So teak tuning, this was an interesting story too. A young lady was interviewing for our marketing position in the company. Beautiful resume, good credentials. But what intrigued me was in the interview, she funded the majority of her collegiate career with this making these little bushings for these skateboards, and I was like, holy smokes, what? And she got to talking about that, and then in the interview, she's like, yeah, this social media, I think my social media she's very humble. It was pretty good, and it wasn't pretty good, it was really good. And so we made her a job offer, and at the same time with the job offer, we made her an offer to buy the company, her company. It was kind of a company at that time from a legal entity perspective. It was a brand for sure. She was building a great brand. And we bought that. Then we expanded the SKU portfolio. We started to put our own hard-earned investment into it and grow it. And this Christmas, holidays right now, yesterday in particular, unbelievable growth. Pandemic helped the business a lot. It gives kids a very active little toy to play with at home that's not super disruptive. And we're putting a ton of innovation into this particular niche. So there's an entrepreneurial, good opportunity that's been for me, it's been a blast. From a different standpoint, the team's run with it almost completely without me. The creativity, the marketing, the innovation and how it's presented to the market, the different ways to make new products. It's amazing. I love watching.
I've never encountered this. It's called fingerboarding. And so it's a skateboard that you manipulate with your fingers. You can see a little tiny picture of that there on the left. I believe we may have a young person in this picture here, Ben. I'm not sure who that gentleman is with the black t-shirt. Is that right? Is that I asked if we could get a picture of one of your, because during the pandemic, a couple of uh, offspring, some young boys started working in the warehouse.
Yep. So the chief operating officer, his name is Tom DeGrave. His son is Zach DeGrave, and my son is Zach Pearson. And during when things shut down and over the summer, um, Zach started to take an interest in the business and started to tag along. And I see he's watching from outside on his phone right now. And
Very cool.
it started to kind of just take a life of its own. It was important to me when I was a kid. I worked at a paper route when I was little. Then I worked at Wegmans. I worked at every different department in Wegmans, and I have a lot of degrees, but I learned a heck of a lot more on those kind of jobs and dealing with the public. And then I had experiences like my dad would buy me one tool a year for a birthday or for Christmas, and then something would break in the house. He's like, okay, let's go fix it. And I learned so much more from those experiences than I did from my formal education in terms of what I really, really valued. So as Zachary showed interest in the business, he would come in, and then Zach DeGrave started to come in, and then Josh DeGrave came in a bit. And then we started to set up a program where there was a whiteboard in the office and employees could write jobs for the kids to do. And it was the responsibility of the kids to go read the job, go find the job owner, talk to them about it, understand what was going on with the need, and not have a parent involved. Figure out how to tackle projects, figure out how to talk to people, figure out like, hey, here's how to use a screwdriver. A great example, my favorite example from this whole program was the two Zachs one summer day. I asked them to move a huge bookshelf full of books, like one of the ones behind me. And I wasn't there. I heard this through other employees. Zach DeGrave looks at Zach Pearson. He's like, we're not big enough to move that. How are we going to move this thing? And Zach Pearson looks back at him. He's like, well, if you add us both together, we're about the size of an adult.
Okay.
Was his answer. And then they were tasked with moving the books and keeping the chronological order of the library. So they designed a cart system to move it. And then they figured out that they could slide the bookshelf, and nobody helped them. It was great because they had to problem solve the whole thing and in a pretty safe environment, and then like ask and check in if it's okay. And like these little skills are why I really wanted more and more of them in the business, because that's what they couldn't pick up at school. And that's what I picked up in my childhood it's harder to find that these days. There are no paper routes, and you don't see kids playing outside in mass congregation in backyards so much anymore. So like the social interaction and those soft skills are what I really hope the business can provide to more kids and more employees' kids.
I heard a very thoughtful thinker say that one of the big things we lost in the Industrial Revolution was that children would be working with their families when they were children, and that there's a very, very special relationship that occurs. People who work on farms haven't lost this.
Yeah.
We sure gained a lot, Ben, with the Industrial Revolution. So much of the world came out of poverty in the 1800s. People are under aware of that. In fact, I just got to throw this in. The world went down below 1 billion people in poverty. So the number of humans on the earth who are in poverty, as defined carefully by economists, went below 1 billion for the first time since 1820 recently.
To add to that, the thing that excites me though, to give some hope to that, is that after the bubonic plague is when the history went to the Renaissance.
Okay.
And I feel that that's coming in terms of innovation, disruption, and post 2021, with the way the world is starting to think about things more from consumer health, public safety, and engineering and creation.
Wow, I love that, Ben. Uh, just to give people a little orientation here, we're going to talk for about 10 minutes and then give you a chance to be in a breakout room with some people and just see if you can integrate some of the interesting things we're hearing about here. And then we'll come back together and I'll give you a chance to ask Ben some questions, or I'll just keep peppering him with questions because believe me, I could do this for hours. Happen to be fascinated with people. And I'm still going to go back to that Sumit question. But before we do that, I want to ask you, what was the impact on the culture of the business having those young people in there solving problems like that? How did that affect the adults around?
Well, Zach's grandfather sure is happy when Zach's around.
Somebody said, Ben, that when you get 3 generations in a room, the anxiety goes down.
That's very true in our family, for
And that
sure.
would have been a fairly decent thing to try to achieve in a 2020 company that was trying to pivot during COVID and maybe facing death, to have the anxiety go down, bring in some younger generation people. And you've got that with your dad and then the grandchildren all in the room there, all in the house. But I'm curious about that. Would you say there was a lower anxiety level among the people in the warehouse when the kids were around?
I don't know if I'd say anxiety. I'd say there was more joy.
Mm.
Um, I'd see a lot more smiles
Mm-hmm.
um,
Dang.
everywhere. So like even I like to remember an instance where I'd had enough of my corporate executive type duties, so I went out to the rock pile for we manufacture rocks, believe it or not, with Josh DeGrave, and it was probably one of my best afternoons all summer because I didn't really know Josh DeGrave, and he kept having hard times with how to perform the task. So we got to work on some engineering together and ergonomics, and we talked about ergonomics, and he was it just made me so much more happy even than the profit that week. And I like when the kids would walk around the business, people were generally pretty smiley, and the tasks on the board usually cracked quite a few laughs.
Ben, it sounds like this everybody needs a little help sometimes applies to the CEO founder as well.
Yeah, I think that's for sure.
Wait a minute. I just want to share a screen here for a little bit more. Here's another picture from the extremely serious atmosphere at Enalas. Speaking of joy, I guess it's some kind of plank contest. And here you have a senior sales leader eating a cannoli during the contest. I don't know what that says. I wanted to point out the picture on the right is Ben's family. There's big pictures. I thought this was fascinating. Beautiful pictures of Ben's family. There they are next to, what is that, a T-Rex jaw, Ben?
Yep, it's the T-Rex skull that we had in the office, and then we had too many people, so we donated it to a local museum. But we didn't want to lose sight of Rex, or I didn't want to lose sight of Rex, so I hung it in the lobby.
Speaking of contribution to society, Enalas does many things to make the world better. This is a leadership development program for young people that they support. So I'm just going to go back to Sumit here. Ben, you said, what was it that I'm interested in intuition about people. What was it about him that you were experiencing during that day that caused you to start having ideas and run down a road with him?
He's super authentic and sincere. I could tell it right from the beginning, even in how his products were made. I love product and stuff. Anybody will tell you I'm a bit on the materialistic side of life. My sister's laughing at me right now. But I think people like Sumit really cares about what he makes and how it's made. And I could feel it that day in his products. And then the way he talked about them to me, and he came from, he's third generation. And he talked about it wasn't a sales call. He talked about his philosophies in life more than like trying to pitch me on a product.
Mm.
And that's what struck the chord fast. It was I talked about my family quickly too, instead of like nuts and bolts, and I felt like I could trust him. And then I told him when I moved to 38 products, he was in Barcelona, Spain when he got that email. And then he called me to say thank you right away. And he said, I'll never forget that too. He said, "Thank you. This is an opportunity that my family has not seen before." I said, "Yeah, I'm scared to death." And he's like, and he's like, "No, we got this." And we figured it all out, and that was hugely successful. We broke a lot of records in that corporation with that partnership.
Wow. Ben, we titled this day, this interview, Transparency and Experiment. So you just made me want to segue over there. So there you were, very transparent in the early days of this joint venture, and saying that I'm scared to death. Some people say it's better to never show your fear, never let them see you sweat. There's probably wisdom in that in the right situation, but that was not the situation to do that, apparently. Um, can you take us into a little bit about this fascinating experiment of transparency, both financial and maybe the kind you were just talking about there?
Yeah, so in my corporate America days, I worked for a company. I learned a ton, and I met a lot of good people. And I learned a lot of tough things, like the buck stopped with the board, and the determination for profitability with that much power sitting with one or two people. Um, I sat uneasy with some of their decision making in regards to how it affected other people's lives. And that was my big impetus for change in wanting to start my own company. And when I started my own company, I didn't, I, it sounds a bit arrogant, but I knew it was going to be successful. But I also knew that I was trying to find a way to keep my own ego in check. And I was trying to find a way to have the company self govern without me being so much of the final, like those private equity guys that I remember having the final boardroom brawl. And that's when I started the philosophy, which isn't perfect by any means, but to be hyper transparent with financials and performance, and to allow people to see the good, the bad, and the ugly, P&L, balance sheet, at all different levels in the company, to use it as a self-governance tool, so that when people are making decisions, they could decide, like, is this ream of paper worth the extra 10 cents for that quality or not? Or is cash flow where it is right now? Should I hurry up and make this purchase, or should I preserve cash flow? And the other reason I wanted that level of transparency is I felt that in my corporate education, the layers of protection around the financials starved the speed of which I wanted my education, my financial education. And in my own company culture, I felt that employees could have a better quality of life if they were exposed, even though it was vulnerable and risky as an owner. But if employees could get hyper fast education on financials, that their lives would be better in the long run. Even though it's a bit detrimental to the owners of the company, I think it's better for the ecosystem of the company, for business acumen to build at a faster pace than even like an MBA program could provide. So those are the two reasons why I'm managing the financials with more transparency than is what's typically seen in corporate America.
Yeah, I was amazed when I saw the level of transparency that you do. You publish monthly and if not weekly, and I was just intrigued. I think people are very emotional about money, right? In fact, one of my best friends, I started the Brugger's bagel chain. He told me, Eric, one of the reasons I succeeded as an entrepreneur is because I'm less emotional about money than most of the people around me. I don't care that much about it. It was so interesting to hear the guy say that. He's got a beautiful house on a lake, and he says that to me. So I was just, I think many people would hear the level of transparency that you would say, well, gosh, doesn't that create some headaches for you? People could feel jealous. I suppose you'd be better than me at listing the challenging emotions that could stir up. Um, can you talk about it a little bit? What allowed you to take those emotions on?
I'm still not great at some of them.
Okay.
Some of them are definitely hot buttons. And then other ones, though, give me tons of energy. I can give you one example. We had a gentleman in the warehouse, great employee, really so consistent, so diligent, so trustworthy. And we were in a time in the pandemic where I was a conservative, saving on money, saving on expenses, and he was responsible for inventory buys. And he held back on the inventory buy, in thinking that he was saving the company money, but not realizing that net working capital, free cash flow impacted by expenses is different than your inventory capital. So he did some harm in that he cut an inventory buy thinking he was doing what was best for the organization.
Hmm.
But so at first there was a reaction of, oh my goodness, this guy just really screwed up. But his heart was 100% in the right place. And because of that, he learned, he picked up a cash flow versus income statement education in an emotional way that will stay with him forever, because he really understood the difference of investing in capital into inventory and then saving on expenses that hit the P&L statement. Whereas that educational opportunity, I was starving for that when I was in my 20s, like to see that kind of thing, to know where those kind of gaps were. So it caused the company a little bit of pain then, but say 5 years from now, as that knowledge continues to build, that's invaluable for him and for the company. So if he went to a job interview and he was discussing working in a warehouse, but having the financial acumen to say that he understood inventory capital versus free cash flow, that he probably just raised his earning potential in that interview by $20,000 a year. So
okay, so the skeptic says, yeah, well, okay, so that's a beautiful story, by the way, but I love it, and maybe we'll touch more on this culture of growth and development that you're starting to take us into, and I would like to ask you to tell these folks a little bit how the course that we're doing together, that I'm leading, the Leading by Managing This Self course that you invested in this year, is going, and what your ROI is out of that. Maybe we'll do that after the breakout section, but what would you say to someone who says, okay, I had a client once, Ben, who he caught a glimpse one day of the owners of his company's bonus at the end of the year. He just somehow gazed his eyes upon that number. He was so distraught. He was almost unstrung by it. Just couldn't get over it, for a long time. Right. So I don't know, just is that risk relevant to this puzzle of radical transparency that you're experimenting with?
yeah, I think a lot about those conversations of, so say there is a hyper profitable year and somebody comes into the office upset about that or emotional about that. My first thinking through it is, one is I have to control myself in that conversation. Like my first instinct would be to lash back out and say, well, you don't understand the risk that was taken and blah, 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 blah. But then I think through like, I wonder what's really behind that. What's the educational opportunity there? Is there, cash flow versus profit understanding? Do they understand the strategy of the reinvestment of the cash back into the company? And then it's more of a discussion of the priority of values of the culture and the money reflecting that. And is this employee a long-term employee that I'm going to put that much investment and confidence into or not? And then having those discussions in a professional manner of, here's how it works. Here's what the financials look like. Here's what the first year of my life was like in 2012. Here's what the cash flow looks like. And like having those open discussions. I think I look at Jeff Bezos and it makes me sick.
Why?
The congregation of wealth at the top, by leveraging an amazing country system without spreading the wealth back into the greater ecosystem isn't sustainable for society.
You think he's going to join the Bill Gates Club and become a guy who gives it all away down the road?
The article came out today that his wife is going to give away her 40%.
Yeah, I saw that.
Ex-wife.
Well, I loved your answer there about you had to be ready for it. And so much of it is about managing yourself. I was just thinking that transparency is so relevant to so many situations, to parenting, to anybody who runs a budget with a team, and that maybe one of the advantages of your approach is that you get a read on the degree to which people feel responsible for their own experience in life.
Yep.
Versus kind of, might slip into thinking that the problem in their life is somebody else. So I want to do this now. We've been doing this on this program, and I really like it. People have been liking it. Is give you a chance. So many interesting ideas have been exchanged here. So I'm going to use the breakout function in Zoom and let it put you into groups of 3 for a couple of minutes. Probably about 8-9 minutes. And here's some questions that you could they're very simple questions. What has today's discussion got you thinking about? And what leadership actions anywhere in the company you run, in the team you're leading, in the family you're involved in, what actions has today's discussion inspired you to consider? And here's some guidelines about the breakout. Don't waste a lot of time with introductions. You'll be amazed at how quickly the time flies by. I like to invite you to just take the opportunity to try to think out loud with some people. Probably you won't know. You probably know some of them. And just see what comes out of your mouth. See how it sounds. Try out some ideas. Try out some thoughts. So if we got somebody who jumps in and says, "Okay, I'll go first," and just start saying a few things for a few minutes. Then let somebody else take a turn. Zach Pearson, I hope you're going to join in on this. Hope somebody's going to get the benefit of hearing what you have to say as a character in the story. And just you don't have to agree on everything in this process. So I love how Zoom works. So here we go. So welcome back. I just want to run through this, show you what's coming up next here. I have really had the pleasure of meeting Jonathan Rubright many years ago, and then recently quite a bit in his role as a vice president of a very interesting organization that certifies the doctors in this country. And I'm really looking forward to interviewing John on January 7th. I think you'll find there's some similarities between John and Ben in terms of thoughtfulness and big picture thinking and really high levels of emotional intelligence. And then on the 28th of January, this is a very special person. This is the successor of the largest real estate company in Vermont, Ernie Pomerleau, deeply involved in the community here. And again, a very, very thoughtful person with a fascinating succession story to tell, involving being really pissed off at your father and how to get over that. So those are some of the cool things we got coming. We got some other things going on here. Let me see if I can go back to that slide. Similar, Mary McClure, very interesting person. And this Green Mountain Power Company is really on the forefront globally of pivoting to more green energy. They've gotten a lot of national attention. Mary's the successor to a person who became famous in Vermont, worked very closely with Mary Powell. I am just thrilled that I'm going to have the chance to talk to these folks on this program. And I want to throw a little word out for a word of mouth. If you're enjoying this, if you're thinking it's worthy of value, please feel free to share when you get these posts with people you know who you think might get some value out of coming in here and listen to some wisdom for free for an hour. So along the lines of shameless self-promotion, Ben, tell them a little about the course. You guys are on a journey. It's not a perfect journey with this course I've developed called Leading by Managing Self. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but could you just give a little picture? What's the value in the course? How is it helping the business?
I think the course gives us, the first thing it gives us is nomenclature so that we can speak the same language about really tough emotional topics and trying to get rid of some of the confusion that can happen by making sure we're all using big ones like I statements, triangles, relationship triangles, systems thinking. And then the course really helps us cut through a lot of crap and slow things down and talk about tough topics that sometimes corporate America just ignores or tries to brush under the rug. And I think if I just sum it up in one sentence, we're working at creating more authenticity in our discussions.
Authenticity relates to trust, and if you have trust, you get higher quality information flow between people. And I'm passionate about this idea of helping build teams. Usually, people who are very good at this already, who differ well, who can differ productively. So, Ben, how was your breakout room?
Pretty
Zoom
good.
seemed to be interested in getting a two generation. Ben and his parents happened to land in the same breakout room. Doug Pearson and Ben's mom, what was it like to hear your son talk on this interview show? If you wouldn't mind unmuting and sharing, did you learn anything there?
I loved it.
Why, Mrs. Pearson, what was interesting to you?
I'm just very proud of him. It's nice to hear him speak in this venue because I don't often have that opportunity. And I really appreciated seeing the values that are driving him and hearing him speak of them. I see it, but I haven't always heard him speak of it.
So we have just a few more minutes, 3 minutes. Anybody got a question for Ben or a thought to share? Love to get you folks into this conversation for a few minutes at the end. What was interesting to you in the breakout room or in what Ben said or whatever, what struck you?
I'll go. Oh,
John and then Steve.
okay.
Someone in our group brought up the idea of the radical transparency that Ben's been talking about, and that made me remember the company is not only being radically transparent with its employees, but also with Ben's own family. That's often kind of thought of as two separate things, but the fact that they overlap here, I think, is was very interesting to me.
You know, John, I heard a wise person say recently that in the 21st century, the idea that love is a part of successful business teams is coming back. I thought that was very interesting. She said this is a person who's on sort of cutting edge of HR thinking. And she said that the idea that people shouldn't be friends with those they work with or even those they supervise is sort of falling out of fashion because so many people want that power of connectivity on their teams. So it does require a skill set like Ben was talking about, where you're able to handle difficult conversations, even with someone who you're very close with. I just thought that was fascinating. Steve Legler from Montreal, thank you for making this an international call.
Yeah, I got into a room with two people that work for Ben, and I was asking about, it seems the example where the other employee made a mistake and that was accepted because it's a safe place to make mistakes. And I was asking them if is that true? Have they seen examples? And it turned out I had somebody with their direct report, and they were both in the same room with me, and we were talking about how open you are to actually making mistakes. It was very cool. And I also mentioned that I love family business stories where somebody hires their parent rather than the parent hiring the child, because there aren't that many of them, but I've heard them before. But I always find that it's really cool when you get three generations, but it's not 1, 2, 3, it's one and then one above and one below.
Yeah,
and this was really, I loved hearing the authenticity and what John just mentioned, that it's the business, but it's the family too. And it's basically not just what Ben does, it's who he is. And I think that came through, and that was really interesting to hear about. So thanks for letting me be part of this.
Thank you, Steve. Zach Pearson, can I call on you for a second? What's it like to work in a warehouse?
It's mostly it's pretty fun getting to engineer and figure out solutions to problems. And yeah.
Thank you. Well, Ben, I just want to thank you again for all that you're doing, and just really thank you for taking the time. It can be a little anxiety producing to get on a call like this, and I know that takes time just to think about things and ruminate on things a little bit. So very generous of you. Thank you, Ben.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
I'm really glad this is on YouTube. In the breakout, my producer here, Roz Saunders, said to me, Eric, that should be a book. So I say, well, Ben's got plenty of time, so he just can, spend some time writing. But I agree with her. Beautiful stories. Thank you, Ben. Folks, have a good holiday. Hope to see you in the new year. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.